everyone, my name is Adam Michael and I'm going to be teaching you how to use chalk pastels. Now honestly, the first time I've ever used chalk pastels was actually with chalk on the pavement, and I loved making like pretty little scenes and things like that. And what I discovered when I was mixing those colors together, I get other colors, which is really cool. And that's what's awesome about pastels, specifically chalk pastels, is how easily they blend. Now there's a couple things that you need to know before you even start. First off, you'll notice I'm wearing an apron. All right, now I've gone through many years in the art field because I've been working over at the Cloverleaf School District as an art teacher, and I've ruined a lot of clothes because I didn't have an apron on. So that's the first thing I recommend, is having some type of apron or maybe a shirt that it's okay to get a little messy. Now with chalk pastels, they do come out pretty easily, but honestly I would prefer something like this and not take the risk of ruining something that an article of clothing that you like. With that being said, we're going to open up this box. Now this is a brand new box. All right, this is a brand new box of 48 pastels. Now you can go to Hobby Lobby and pick something up. Now this is on the cheaper end. This is more of a scholar type versus a professional. But you can see just a variety of color here. It's pretty amazing actually how vibrant these colors are. And what we're going to do is we're going to be doing a landscape. Now the first thing I always recommend is you always have an idea in your head. What do you want this landscape to look like? Do you want there to be mountains, maybe a creek, maybe a sunset scene? And then I would look up pictures or take pictures yourself of some sunsets that you see. And I would use those as references to help you out. Because honestly, I ask this to a lot of students is, draw a dog for me. And they struggle. Well, I don't even know what a dog looks like. Or they have a picture of it, but that's not the right picture. So what I do is I actually get a photograph, and I usually work from photographs. It's very important to do that, specifically if you want to have the details and the accuracy correct. Because I could always just look and be like, oh, well, that's not right. I need to fix it here, here, and here. Okay, so that's what I always recommend. Get some references of what you want to do. And also what we're going to learn today is what is a foreground, a background, and a middle ground. Now these all tie in very well to a composition. Now the composition is the overall layout of your artwork. Now the composition is extremely important because a lot of people, let's say when they're taking a photograph, they want to center everything. Well, that's actually not a good idea. You want to have things a little off center. And you want to have things in this thing we call the rule of thirds. And basically it's kind of grid. Now the great thing is on your cameras, specifically your phones, you can set up these grids manually, and you can put the grids up on your camera, and then you can put the people in what we call hotspots, which are little areas of where you want things positioned on your paper. And when you put those things in those positions, honestly, the composition will always look good. So you don't want to center it, you kind of want to off-center it. That's number one when we're dealing with composition. That's why it's good to have a lot of picture references and to kind of pick out what you want to do and how you want to do it. The next step then is to take a pencil and kind of sketch out some. Have a brainstorm your idea on paper. All right, don't just grab the pastels and just start scribbling all around. All right, a lot of people don't have that much experience in it, and they'll make a mistake, and now they're in trouble because now they're using the really nice pastels, and they're going to have to start all over. Where a pencil has this thing called an eraser, so you can always go back and erase. So once you have the layout down on your paper, that's where we're going to start right now. All right, now you're going to be looking at me. I've got a blank paper, but I've done this so much that I already kind of know what I'm going to be doing. All right, now what I want you to do is we are going to be doing a sunset scene. I love sunsets, they're so pretty. And the beautiful thing about a sunset is just the amount of colors that are in there. So now usually I would be working with white paper or manila. This is manila paper, and the great thing about the paper is there's some teeth to it. Teeth means a little rougher, which means it's going to hold the pastel a little bit better. So I'm going to start out with just holding the pastel like this. All right, so I'm holding it flat. And I'm just going to start, and I'm just going to kind of plug in some yellow. Now while I'm doing this, I'm just taking it on the flat end and I'm just kind of putting it in there. Okay, and that's going to be kind of where my sun's going to be located. All right, then I'm going to go, and the beautiful thing about it is I've got so many different values of color. So I'm going to add a little bit of orange, because usually what happens is it's going to progressively get darker. So now I'm going to take a darker orange. Now, depending on how many colors you have, some, you only have, let's say, 16 colors or 24 colors. I've been blessed with 48. So I am going to be using that to my advantage. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't be doing the same thing. You just need more blending, which means a little bit of yellow into just an orange is going to make the same colors that I'm making here on this paper. Now, as you can see, I'm kind of going around in a circle. And I'm going to start getting a little bit darker. So now we went from an orange to more of a red. Now, this is where we start really seeing a good little bit of separation here. Now, what you don't want to do is you don't want to be blending right away. You want to kind of put all these colors down on your paper and then progressively blend it. And then what I'm going to do is now I'm going to take actually a almost bluish purple here, and that's going to represent just the sky really getting dark. So you can see now I'm using a good amount of my paper. You don't need to use this much of the paper, but that's what I'm going to start out. So it looks kind of like this, and a lot of people are like, well, that doesn't look like anything. Well, that's fine, because I am nowhere near done. I still need a lot of blending that I need to do. But what I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to take those same colors, and you'll notice something is when the sun is shining, specifically with a sunset, it's going to shine and have a reflection in the water. And a lot of people are like, oh, well, the water's blue. No, not necessarily. The water's blue because of the reflection of the blue sky. Of course, when you have, let's say, a stream, which is what I'm making here, you're going to notice that the stream is going to be the same color of the sunset, as long as that stream and that sunlight is still hitting that stream directly. If it's not, then of course it's going to not be that same color. So this is what it looks like. So I have my sky right here, and I have my stream running this way. And I may actually extend it out just a little bit more. But remember, the further you get out, I'm going to add a little bit of purple or red in this area here. Something along those lines. So, and granted, remember, we're not going to be blending. That's the last step you want to do, is blend. Now, after we have this down on the paper, now it's time to start doing what I call my background. You always want to work from the background forward. So the background is, well, in the background. So when you think about a landscape, you think, well, background, okay, that would be, let's say, mountains. And that's a great choice. I'm going to actually take a brown here, okay, a brown. And I'm going to go very kind of lightly here. And a lot of people are like, well, you're covering some of your sky. Well, that's okay, because you want some of those colors to be in there. And when you start blending all this together, it's going to look really good. And then I'm going to add another one here. Now, interestingly enough, there's a term called atmospheric perspective. Now, atmospheric perspective means that the mountain that's the furthest away has the most atmosphere in between you and the mountain, meaning it's going to be lighter. So the closer the mountain is, the more vibrant and the darker it is. And if you don't believe me, you can just look it up. I always tell my students, if you don't take my word for it, I want you to do some investigating on yourself to find out, to make sure that I'm telling you the truth. Okay, and I have one more mountain right there. All right, so I've got a series of 3 mountains, and a lot of people are like, well, how do you make mountains? Well, first off, mountains don't look like pyramids. All right, they don't look like pyramids. They actually have, it's more of a jagged line, and that's really important to do when you're doing this, is make sure it's a jagged line. We're not doing little triangles. I mean, that's what you do kind of more in the elementary setting, and then honestly, that's what you see in your books, if you're in children's books, which I always find fascinating. But they're not like that at all. They're jagged lines. Okay, now with that being said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take just the same brown, I'm going to lay it flat here, and I'm just going to go over some of these areas. And you'll notice that I'm now blending 2 colors together. And these colors are, of course, the colors that are in the sky. and the brown that I'm actually using right now. Now, you'll notice though that since I'm using the same color, you really can't see a separation there. And that's why we're going to start diving into some deeper, more vibrant browns when they get closer to me. So this is going to be a little bit more of a reddish brown color, and it's going to be a little bit more vibrant, a little bit more bold. And I may actually go in with some darker shades, maybe even some black. And I don't normally use black, but in this case, this wouldn't be too bad of an idea. Take some here. I'm actually going to go in with a little bit of pink in this back one here to lighten it up a little bit, because remember, that atmosphere is going to lighten it up. So honestly, what I do is it's all about the environment around it. What that means is if you're shining a white light, well, those objects that you're going to be seeing are going to be very bright in color. But if you were to take that white light and cover it over with an orange light, so now the light is going through orange, it's going to turn the whole room orange. That's what a sunset does. It's pretty awesome to see. I do love looking at sunsets. They're just so beautiful. And it's so nice looking at those. I love going with my family, even when we go for like a hike or something along those lines, and we get to look at them. Okay, and so now what I'm doing is I'm adding a little bit of blue to kind of darken these up. Okay. And a lot of people right now still will be like, I really don't know, it's not looking too good. I'm like, I haven't blended it yet. So never get discouraged when you're making an artwork. I always like saying there's an awkward stage. There's definitely an awkward stage in every artwork. And it's fun though to see that, because it doesn't look great, but know that it's not about what it looks like now, it's the end result. And never, never, never get discouraged when you're making art. It's never a good thing to do. There's been many times where I've wanted to crinkle up something and throw it out because I just didn't give it enough time. Sometimes you just need to go through the process and fall in love really with the process instead of the results you're seeing right now. It's really important. I can't stress that enough. And you're going to notice there is going to be some highlights here, and I'm going to put the highlights kind of on the peak of the mountains here. And then I'm actually going to go with a white, okay, now white, and that's going to be where my sun is. And it's going to be, now because I laid that yellow down, it's going to be a really bright yellow color. Now you don't really want to blow off the chalk yet. You're not there yet. I wouldn't recommend that. I just did it there because I put a little too much on. And then you want to put some of this white into these mountains. So now we're creating this, it's a highlight. There's highlights and lowlights and shadows. And right now we're just focused on those highlights here, where I'm putting in some of that white to brighten up some of these areas. And the great thing about this paper is right now I've got a lot of chalk on there and it's holding the chalk really well. So that looks pretty good so far. All right. And I know a lot of people, they'll look at something that I'm doing and they'll be like, oh my gosh, I'm so horrible. I've got years and years of experience doing this. All right, don't get discouraged by what you're looking at. I know a lot of my students will be like, well, I can't do that. And I'm like, you're right. I couldn't do that when I was your age either, but it didn't stop me from trying. And that's the main thing. You got to give it, you got to try, you got to give it your all. And you'll be surprised at the results you see when you give something your full attention. So now I'm going to make this little creek here running through. Probably going to make it come out a little bit and bring it back in. Let's try something like that. And you can see how I'm just kind of off-centering this. And yeah, I mean, if you do notice, I did make a mistake here, you know, and it's not the end of the world. I'm not too upset about that because I know it's going to get cleaned up when we start putting in some of the other colors. The best thing about chalk is you can add so many layers to it as long as they start out lighter. You always want to start out lighter with the chalk because if you, let's say, take out a really dark color, it's going to be really hard to recover that, and that's not what we want. So right now you can see I'm just kind of blending these in here, blending in these colors. And all this is just a reflection of what the sky is giving me. We've got a really nice little background here, and now we're going to start working in the middle ground. All right, now that middle ground is really important, and you got to think to yourself, well, what am I going to include in this middle ground? Now, if you took a lot of the pictures, so what would be where the mountains are? Well, first off, we're going to have some land. So that would be something along now. You don't want to go vibrant green, all right? You don't want to be like, oh, well, the grass is green. Yes, the grass is green, but not during a sunset. All right, so not during a sunset. So we're going to actually do something that's like an off green. All right, so you can see the difference. You've got this green here, and you've got this green here. Now you can see the difference, and you can see how one stands out more. And that's not one that we want. We want one that kind of more would make sense in the scene. A lot of people would use this type of green. That's almost like a neon green, and you don't want to use that. On top of that, know that we are going to be blending this green in, and we're going to be incorporating some of the colors that are in the sky. So then, even some of my mistakes that I did have are going to get covered up here because the green is a little bit darker of a color. And yet again, I'm just using the flat end of this. And we're going to have the green even kind of encroach some of this mountain, this mountain right here. So it's going to be, this mountain's a little bit more in front. This one's a little bit further back. Now we're creating what we call depth. When you start moving some of the objects back to the background and some to the foreground, you're creating this idea of depth. So now right there, that's pretty good as far as getting the landscape done, specifically the grass. The next step though is to add a little bit of yellow here. Okay, so I'm going to take this and I just want to add a little bit of where I would have it. See now it's starting to really look like that this grass is tied in and makes sense in the space. Just by adding that yellow, that little yellow hue. Then we're going to go in with a little orange. Add a little orange here. And it's starting to really take shape. It's what we call, as photographers love to say, it's golden hour. It's where it starts transforming the landscape into like this golden warmth. It's the warm feeling that you get that's tied to this. So that's what we're doing right now. And it's not looking too bad. I'm pretty happy with this so far. And we got to get some of that in there. So now all of a sudden, it's starting to look pretty good. And the next step is, well, we got to create something in the foreground. So what would be in the foreground? You know, like I was thinking, well, maybe a little log cabin, kind of in this one area, but I'm going to lean towards, I'm just going to put some trees. I'm going to keep it without anything that's man-made. I want to just keep it with just what nature gives you. So I'm going to probably have, let's see, and you want to make it, now here's the great thing is, now a tree, let's say if the tree was back here where the mountains are, it would be like itty little bitty. But because we're now in the foreground, as you get closer, as things and objects get closer to you, they get bigger. So we're going to take up almost a good amount of the space in this location here. And you can see where my hand is. It's probably right about here. I may do one more. Probably one or two, maybe a smaller one and a big one. And I'm trying to figure out where you want that to be. And I think here would be a great little composition. That would fall right into my little hot spots that I want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, yet again, that same green. All right, so I'm going to take this same green and I'm going to make kind of like a little pine tree. And I'm going to start in the sky. Now, a lot of people are going to get a little bit concerned here, but I know it'll look good. So I'll do a tree right there. And I usually start out with just a line. I want to make sure that it's upright. A lot of times you start a tree, it starts leaning, and we don't want that. I want to make sure that these are nice vertical trees, and they're not going to be getting in the way. And then we're going to do one right right here. Goes right into that mountain there. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. So I just do 2 lines, and now what I'm going to do is I'm literally going to take my chalk and I'm going to make these kind of little, I could call it scribbles, but they kind of just flare out. It's kind of like eyelashes would be a good way to describe it. And it's not going to be full at the top, but it is going to start getting fuller as it goes down. Now, fuller meaning there's going to be more. Now, I'm doing it in a very neutral color. Neutral, for the most part, green is in this case is more of a kind of a neutral. It's not going to be really vibrant, all right, overpowering. But know that what I want to do is I want to add blue to this. And a lot of people are like, well, wait, why are you adding blue to this? And it's like, well, right now I want these trees to pop. All right, and it's awesome to see when you've got these warm colors, which is red, yellow, and orange, against some blue colors, which is green, purple, and blue. And I'm thinking I might want to add one more to kind of finish this off. And I'll add it over here. I'll add it right here. Let's see. Yeah, I'm going to go right here. Go down. There's my line. And then I start doing it. And like I said, it's just this eyelash thing. It's not too difficult. And don't get over heady with it, I like to call it. You know, you don't want to be thinking, oh, it doesn't have to be perfect. It's a tree. You know, the branches don't always go straight, don't always go perfect. It's not a big deal. Okay, so I just got done putting in my branches there in this tree. And the next step, though, is to darken it with a little bit of blue. So now all of a sudden, I'll show you the two dudes. You can see that there's a little bit of a difference. You know that this one's going to pop a little more. I may do that one, and I'm going to do probably even a darker one. These two are going to look really good. These are going to really pop. And we want it to, and we want to really accentuate the sunset. And you're like, wait, why are we accentuate the sunset by doing the trees blue? Yes. What happens is your eyes usually are more attuned to warmer colors. They respond to them better. Now what I do is I then use this blue color to make those colors in the background pop more. And I'll do it here. And just kind of go through. And yet again, I'm just going over the top here. And I'm going to add some more yellow to this to add some highlights. Because you know, they are in the sun. They're going to have that warm little hue to it. And the one thing about pastels, it's very hard to get a lot of details with it. I do like landscapes in some cases just because of the details that you can get out of it. Pastels can only take you so far. Now they do have things like pastel pencils that can definitely get you a lot of details. But I don't have those at my disposal. We are going to add a little bit of this darker green here. It's like a bluish kind of color. Along those lines, and maybe some shadow here, which is your low light where the mountains are. So now all of a sudden I've got my shadows in. You know, I've got some nice colors going on here, and that's really starting to take shape. And I'm almost about done here. The last step, though, is to take my fingers. Now, make sure when you do this, really important, make sure that your fingers are clean from all these other colors. All right? So I'll wipe them in my apron because I got one. Please don't wipe it in your shirt. That would not be a good idea, specifically if you're wearing white. But you are going to take your middle finger, or whatever finger that you feel is a little bit stronger. And what I do is I take my finger and I put it over the top. Okay, so I'll take my finger and I'll put it over the top like this. So now I've got a little bit more stability here. And I'll start blending this sky. And this is really cool. I do like doing this. You got to start with the yellow first and work your way to the darker colors. Don't go darker colors first because that's going to ruin your picture. Always go lighter to darker. And I kind of go just back and forth. You don't want to have, you want a nice horizontal direction when you're doing with the sky. So I'm just blending it horizontally. And you don't really want to fill the page up. And I say that because you're going to get chalk everywhere. If you're going to make some mistakes on the side of your paper. So I always get a bigger paper, and then I'll start working from that bigger paper. So that's so far so good. Now you can see I've got one finger down. That's red. I can get away with the red. Well, I'm probably going to use this finger here because I got some lighter areas here. Now remember, this is the atmospheric perspective here, so it's going to blend in. It's going to look a little bit lighter, which is good. And then as it gets further back, it's going to get darker. Okay, so same thing. I'm going to take the same finger actually this time around. Looks pretty good. Blend this all in. And then this one, I'm going to use the other finger, the darker finger. Get that in there. Okay, now the next step is I could actually use both these fingers, but remember red and green make kind of brownish color, okay? You start muddying up some of the colors. So that's why I'm trying to wipe off some of my fingers here. And I really want to make sure that I don't have anything. You could get a wet paper towel, works great. Just make sure that it's not wet when you apply it to the paper. And then now I'm going to go in with the green. Now this is where it really starts looking nice. You got the different colors going on. And I will do the same thing right here. Now don't go into that reflection. You don't want to do that because then it's going to look really bad. You want to leave another finger for that. And I'm going to use my ring finger, which I haven't touched yet. Now you'll notice that I have some chalk residue right here. I'm going to do a little bit. I'm going to blow a little bit, and don't blow too hard. It's going to get into your parent's eye or your own eye or your brother and sister's eye. Just a little bit, all right? That gets it out of the way. And then what you do is you go in. There you go. Looking pretty good. Yeah, it's really turning out nice. I'm pretty happy with it. And that is it. All right, everybody, you got your finished product. Now the last step, the very last step, is to take a fixative. Now a fixative can be sold at Hobby Lobby or at Pat Catan's. You can pick one up there. But what the really important thing about this is, if I were to take my fingers and I would go like this, I would get chalk all over my fingers. I would get it all over my shirt. It's kind of messy, which is what I said in the beginning of this program. So what I want you to do is get that fixative, or maybe if your parents have hairspray, that would work too. All right, so you could take some hairspray or a fixative, and about 6 to 12 inches above the paper, you want to go horizontally, and then I go vertically. And I do it twice. And then after that, you want to let it sit outside, and you want to be doing it outside because of the fumes. And after you do it outside and let it sit there for about 15 minutes, your project is ready to get hung up on the wall. And when someone accidentally bumps into it or touches it, they're not going to get chalk on themselves, their clothes, or their fingers. All right. Thank you so much for joining me. My name is Adam Michael. I'm a Cloverleaf art teacher in that school district. And yet again, the best advice I can give you is never give up. And you've got a ton of potential, and don't let anybody tell you differently. You guys have a blessed rest of your day.